Welcome, everybody. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because it's no secret that crypto has a reputation issue. No thanks to the shortage of scams and misleading media coverage, I think most people might forever exclude themselves from learning about the space. And my guest and I here today take personal offense to that. We want everyone to see the good side of blockchain and the potential of good, sound digital assets, especially at such a crucial turning point in the history of finance and technology. My name is Jordan. Dear Crypto is our brand, and we're all here to understand what really goes on in the crypto space. You guys are what makes our community the most inclusive place to explore Web3. So before we talk about ethical use cases for blockchain and why it's an important investment opportunity, hit the like button and subscribe to be part of Dear Crypto and support the channel. With that being said, I'd love to welcome Guy Dickinson to Dear Crypto. Guy is the founder and CEO of Betacarbon and Climber, both of which businesses have won too many awards to count for work in the technology and climate space. Before Betacarbon, Guy worked at HSBC, one of the world's largest banking and financial services organizations that serves over 39 million people around the world, starting as director of foreign exchange trading and ending as the treasurer and head of markets and security services. So Guy has had a really lengthy career in the traditional finance space. He's now front running an opportunity in the blockchain space, which is really interesting. Guy, welcome to Dear Crypto.
Thanks, Jordan. What a nice introduction.
So we have to wonder why a wildly successful banker decided to give up what I imagine would have been an incredibly, extensive but also lucrative career to pursue business in blockchain. Can you take us back to that aha moment when you decided, actually, this is not for me anymore. I want to run in a different direction?
I can. I think COVID had a lot to do with it, if I'm honest. Life was pretty good. I just moved back from Asia after living away for 16 years in 4 countries. Had a time of my life, brought my kids up there. Life was good. Coming back to Australia was frankly a little bit humdrum after that experience. I think when you're working at HSBC in Asia, it's very different to working in HSBC in Australia. You lose a lot of your ability to make decisions because you're an outpost of a much bigger behemoth. And throw COVID on top of that, you're not sitting with your team of 150 people. You have a bit of time to think. You read more. You tend to consider, why are we sitting in this big blue planet? And I guess it might sound a bit wishy-washy, but I think the fact that I'd had a successful banking career made it easier to jump ship. People think it's the opposite, but actually I felt like I'd kind of reached the top of that tree as far as I wanted to go. So I probably would give more props to people who step into it without anything. Looking at you, that's I honestly mean that it's very easy for someone who has something behind them to jump into something new, because if it doesn't work out, I've still got that. And I can probably always go back to that industry in some more mega capacity, but I probably won't. I'll try and battle it into some other area. So I would say it's a combination of, I felt like I'd done what I needed to do there. I feel like banking is a sunset industry. I don't think the outcomes for what I wanted for the planet were being addressed for my time at the bank. It had its own agenda around that, and it's a very it's a worthy agenda around financing, etc. Sustainable financing and what have you. But for me, I needed to use my time as pragmatically as I could, and I saw the environmental blockchain space the best place to do it.
It's interesting you say that. I think COVID was a pivotal moment for all of us, right? I remember even when I, got back from holiday in Darwin and I was sitting in a 7-hour line to get a COVID test. And I think that the abundance of thinking time I had while sitting there led to me calling my boss, thinking it over, thinking the decision over, calling my boss and deciding to quit from, my job 2 years ago to go after something that felt more purpose driven. what is it about what you do now that feels more purpose driven? And what are you doing now?
Yeah, good question. Um, what am I doing now? I'll start with that. So the carbon markets have been proven time and time again to be the most effective way to decarbonize the planet. People might not like what sits behind it, but it's factual that they're the most effective mechanism to decarbonize businesses and to force a carrot and stick methodology. And what I mean by that is if you decarbonize at a faster pace than the market, you can get paid for it. If you do not, you will have to pay. It's a very simple, carrot and stick kind of methodology. And being a markets person, I thought I had a lot to add in that space. I've traded traditional financial markets for over 25 years. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And I just knew that there was no real reason that carbon markets should be trading like it was 1996. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's on people like me or people who want to step in and use experience from other asset classes to accelerate that pace of change. So what we do is we try and bring obscure markets to life, and we try and bring them to the people so that education is the first step in that. So Betacarbon tokenized Australian carbon credits, which is a regulated financial product. Betacarbon is not. So we structured it so it's not a financial product, so it can move away from the asset class, but each token is backed by a Australian carbon credit. So that's the difference here. A lot of crypto tends to be able to go to zero. Theoretically, ours should not. So does that mean it stops exactly at the price of carbon? No, but you can guarantee that if the intrinsic value of the token is materially below the price of the carbon market, people are going to step in and buy it, because they can also de-engineer it into fiat, so they can sell it into fiat if they want, or the token issuer itself could burn the tokens and sell the carbon. Thereby, that there's going to be a bid somewhere around the price of carbon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the crypto space at the moment, you see these real world assets that exist on the blockchain, and we just have to trust generally that those assets are backed properly. And obviously, Betacarbon has that proof that, what's the comparison between? So, for one token, there is how many units of Australian carbon
Yeah,
backed?
so each unit of carbon is a ton, and
Yep.
we have 1,000 kilograms. So for each ton, there's 1,000 tokens, and each ton of carbon is held in the government registry. So it's a closed registry. So token holders know that at the end of the day, even if I left this fine planet from a heart aneurysm or something, that the backing of the token is sitting in a government register,
Mm-hmm.
which that's unrivaled. That doesn't exist anywhere else. And I think that's a really important point to make. That doesn't mean that, Jordan, if you went and bought 10 tokens, you can say, I want my 10 kilos of carbon, because you can't break up a ton of carbon. It's a ton of carbon. But if you were a business and you wanted to retire that ton of carbon, we have a mechanism for you to do it.
Yeah, so you're in the business of carbon credits. Mainly, you provide the marketplace where people can, trade in carbon credits. And I want to talk about, where the blockchain comes into that, and we'll take a few steps back to that point. But I think something I saw that you recently posted a cartoon on LinkedIn that depicted a father handing his son a bag of cash and said, here, son, I saved all this money for your future. And the son's sort of looking up at him and looks quite confused. And he's got a huge oxygen tank on his back. His main priority is just trying to breathe clean air. And I know that you have a family of your own, and imagine that you would be inspired to an extent to service that next generation that's inheriting a lot of these problems, one of them being climate change. So why blockchain? Because being in the traditional finance industry, I'm sure that you would have been exposed to blockchain to some degree. I'm sure it would have made its way into many conversations. Why did you decide to put carbon credits on the blockchain?
So first, let me explain what blockchain isn't. It's not rocket science. That's like the first point is,
Yeah.
my experience with blockchain was when I was Australia's biggest custodian. I ran the security services business, which meant we settled over 40% of every transaction on the ASX, and they wanted to move to blockchain, and that whole transition failed recently. I think they spent $250 million on that program,
It's a
and
lot
it
of money.
up in smoke. Now, they were very early to the party. That was 2017 that I was having conversations with people within the traditional finance industry and they're all like, our customers had to also integrate into the new ASX chess replacement program. And it was just white space. It's like deer in the headlights. And we, even at HSBC, we were a bit like, wow, this is pretty full on, I guess. And then it was like, well, how does a small company that settles a couple of million a day possibly come up with an infrastructure that's going to fit into what couldn't really be explained at a surface level by the person who was instigating it? So they confused it to a point where it was always going to fail. It created too many questions. Now, if we'd spoken about it saying we're changing our operating system, this is what you'll need to do, here's a 5-step process, which is actually what you could have done, it would have been quite a different scenario, I think, for the ASX. And we haven't thrown blockchain out. I can tell you now that there are several traditional finance programs out there that are going to use blockchain. To do it, they're going to have to change some laws. So concurrently, stuff's going on in the background, which will make this whole space or these conversations that we've had over the past 18 months feel like it never happened, a bit like COVID. Did it really happen? But you have people running for the exit because change scares people. So what was the original question? The original question is why blockchain, right?
Yes.
And for me, blockchain wasn't scary, but I wasn't interested in it when I first got back from Asia. I knew some people who had Bitcoin, good for them. I had a very decent existence. I wasn't looking to make some quick cash. I don't think I ever have been looking to make quick cash, and I think I've scaled Betacarbon in that fashion. It's not trying to tear money out of people that doesn't exist. It's not a hot air asset. And blockchain just needed a little bit of simplification at the end of the day, and that's just a narrative play. And all it is a way to transmit a value, a number, a portion of something in a different way. It's a reward point that you can log in when you're in Thailand. It's a reward point that that's really all it is. At the front, you just see a little widget on a screen. Now, at the end of the day, if the whole of Commonwealth Bank's banking system was on blockchain, that's still all you'd see. And you've never asked before. So do you care about what IBM's sitting behind all that stuff? You don't care. You've never asked. So why do we ask now? So it's just demystifying that there's always been tech you've never understood. You just didn't care. So why do you care now? Is kind of the question I'd ask. Do you care to build your own blockchain? So let's just back it up a second. Like, does it provide a use case? And that's where finally got to answer the question. So does it provide a use case? And I think there's plenty of things where it does and it doesn't. Tokenizing something which already has open access to the market, don't need to do it. If you can open an account today, trade tomorrow, that's really no different to blockchain. You've still got to go through your KYC. You can't do that in carbon. You can't. It's literally, to open an account in the carbon markets, in the Australian carbon market, you'll need to have a large amount of money because the minimum volume size is 5,000 tonnes. You'll need to open an account with the regulator, which will take upwards of 3 to 6 months. So you've missed the opportunity if you thought there was one. So there was a lot of barriers to entry, which blockchain served a purpose.
So there was no way for access for the average retail investor to go, I want access. I'm looking at the carbon market. I see an opportunity, but I can't figure out how to get a piece of the pie. And so blockchain changes that, is what you're saying.
Correct. I mean, it's a way of first of all, it's $35 a ton. You've got to buy 5,000. So we've changed that from $150,000 minimum trade size to a dollar. So
Yeah.
go and buy 30 kilograms of carbon for a dollar. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Seems like a lot. Not many things you can buy 30 of for a dollar.
Not
And
financial
then,
advice, by the way.
no, it's not. And it's not a financial product either. So,
Okay, well, there you go.
let's be clear about it. It's not.
Yeah.
So you're not protected by those warranties
And
that come with it.
And that's because carbon credits are regulated financial products, but tokenized carbon credits, aka cryptocurrency, which is a form of cryptocurrency, is not a regulated financial product.
The way we tokenized it
Gotcha.
makes it not. So you can't come to me and say, I want that ton of carbon. Ever.
Mm.
That right does not exist. But under the token holders agreement, you also know that it doesn't sit with me.
Right. So who's the custodian of the carbon?
We have a custodian.
Yep.
So it moves away from the Betacarbon balance sheet. So it's not part of the asset pool.
And my understanding is that Betacarbon has abstracted away that typical like Web3 experience where you'd go in and connect a wallet and you'd feel like you're doing something really dicey on the internet. You might lose your money, whatever. But it seems that Betacarbon has streamlined that account creation process and that buying process so that it doesn't feel like you're buying something on the blockchain. You're just delivering the benefits that blockchain provides, in that instead of spending, however many hundreds and thousands of dollars to just get your foot in the door, you've actually fractionalized the asset that is carbon credits by putting it on the blockchain and allowing people to buy it at, a dollar or more. Which is basically a widely known and huge benefit of having a traditional asset on the blockchain, is that accessibility, right?
Yeah. Fractionalizations are obviously always one of the key kickers. Portability is big as well. But honestly, carbon credit is quite a ethereal sort of concept anyway, right? So it's a bit like tokenizing gold makes sense, or silver, because it's heavy. You don't want to carry it around with you. If I have gold in my pocket, I'm at risk. So that's a reason to tokenize it from a security perspective. This is already something which is ethereal, but it resides as a widget on a screen. And I guess I've created a form of a digital twin that will represent something similar. It's not exactly the same thing. If you want to own an ACCU in your own name, by all means, call up the Clean Energy Regulator, get your police record checks, do all that guff and get involved. Nothing's stopping you, please. But if you want to understand a little bit about what the market is, educate people around you, try and create more of a groundswell understanding of what these carbon markets are, knowing that they're the most effective form of carbonisation for an economy, then I would absolutely welcome people to go to the Betacarbon website, sign up, have a look. Don't buy anything you don't want. I don't care. Go and learn. Deposit some money, exit some money. It's fine. Absolutely no problem. The process that we've really done there is we were very, very clear that we wanted it to be, when people went there, that they didn't feel like they were buying a crypto asset. We wanted them to feel like they were buying a participation of sorts in the carbon market. That was the reason we did it. That's why when you go there, you won't be offered Bitcoin or Ethereum or Ripple. You can buy Betacarbon, you can sell Betacarbon, or you can do none of it. But that's all we're going to offer you. And I think that's where we knew that we didn't want it to become an all singing, dancing crypto exchange. It is a decentralized exchange where you can buy Betacarbon. Now, if you're already on CoinSpot, you can buy it there as well. We're also listed on 2 global exchanges, so it is expanding its reach and its growth, which is exciting. And we now effectively people who want to buy this asset class in terms of the version of it that we have created, they can. And that's really what it's about. Well, I think we've educated, many thousands of people that otherwise wouldn't have played in this space. And if you think about the actual amount of grassroots interest in this, the paper is littered with carbon challenge sections in the AFR and all this sort of thing. It's a thing, and it's not going away. It's accelerating. It's part of the nuts and bolts now. So if you haven't started looking at it, don't be scared that it's some scary blockchain. It's not. It's an
Fugazi,
Ethereum token. It's been done 10,000 times. But I think the real difference is that it has a intrinsic value because we have marked it on 100% notionally backed basis.
It's almost too perfect of a segue into my next question. And I think you've already somewhat answered it, but I want to read out something that you have posted. And I mean, I feel like at this rate, it's pretty obvious. I've just like stalked you to the high hilt. But I think you have a lot of, you know, in terms of the value of your posts and the information that you put out, it's you know, it makes me want to ask more questions, and hopefully people feel the same. So, you know, my question really was, why are carbon credits an investment opportunity that people should be aware of? I want to guide your answer with a post that you made. You said, we have such a unique situation occurring in the Australian carbon market right now. We have the safeguard mechanism about to come into play and force 215 of Australia's largest emitters to become compliant with the year-on-year reduction on baseline emissions. At the same time, we have word that the methodology that has created around 40% of Australia's carbon credits will no longer be able to be registered and is being discontinued with no obvious replacement. Can you explain to us in simple terms what all of this means and why it excites you? Because I think it highlights the value of carbon credits and, better yet, tokenized carbon credits.
So it's a big statement. And for those, I think I'll start with the safeguard mechanism because it's a stupid name. let's call it it's an emissions trading scheme is what it is. And 200, you have to, if you emit 100,000 tons scope 1 and 2 emissions, then you will come into play. So if you're a coal miner or you're a big polluter or a big miner, you're going to be in scope. Now, when you're in scope, at the end of this first financial year, you're going to be asked to reduce your emissions by 5%. And then next year, another 5%. And the year after, another 5%. So while it's 100,000, there's many companies in there who are emitting 5 million tons, right? So if they have to bring down 5% of 5 million tons, that's 250,000 tons. That's just one company. It's not easy to make a carbon credit. And there's probably, you know, the actual issuance yearly is probably around 18, 19 million per year. When these companies need to come to market to offset that reduction when they haven't done it, because there's only so many ways that you can actually decarbonize in reality, they take a long time to implement. If you retrofit an energy facility with some sort of capture, you know, that captures carbon, that's expensive. It takes time, you know. So we've got this really weird situation where we've created this inelastic demand, and the supply that should be going to them over the next few years is also being questioned. Because in Australia, the big difference between a carbon credit in Australia in relation to, say, Europe, which is the world's biggest carbon market, many, many billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, they don't capture carbon. It's just it's a permit. So the government says, here, you can emit a ton of carbon. But then next year they say you can only emit 0.8, 0.7, 0.6. So it's exactly the same thing, except in Australia, our carbon credits aren't just magicked up by the government. It's a tree in the ground, or it's soil carbon, or it's a landfill gas, or it's one of these methodologies. Now, as it relates to your point around that 40% of methodologies, a methodology is a way to create a carbon credit.
Right.
HIR, human-induced regeneration. If you haven't been living under a rock and you look at this space, then you'll know that that's been called into question by an ANU professor who used to run the scheme at the regulator. And he's arguing that the intended modelling hasn't produced the outcomes expected, which is fine, great. You know, let's have a look under the rug and have a chat about it. But what it's led to is a lot of issuance in that space has been pulled back. People are saying, now have I really bought what I thought I bought? Now, at the end of the day, people need to still buy carbon credits, regardless of what you think, and they'll need to buy that many carbon credits, and then you throw growth on top of that. Just because we want you to reduce doesn't mean they will reduce. So it's a very simple concept for me, where we had a view that HOR was going to put this many credits on the market. Now, if we turn that off in the future, there's a new one called IFM. My intelligence tells me it's not ready to go. Now, if it's not ready to go, that means no one's registered a project. To register a project and still get a carbon credit, 2 or 3 years minimum. Minimum in reality. You've got to plant the tree, it's got to grow a bit, it's got to capture carbon, it's got to get measured and audited, yada, yada, yada. So you've got a situation where I believe over the next 3 years, you won't feel it immediately, but you've got to remember the legislation only really changed this year. And if you've ever worked in a large corporate, the first thing they do is go, is it real? Let's go talk to the government. That'll take 2 months, and then they'll put it to the board, and then they'll go, okay, what are we going to do about it? So you're already at July, August, and they haven't done anything about it. They haven't really thought about how to hedge it or move ahead with it. What am I going to do? What's my way forward in this space, knowing that I'm going to need to buy credits for the next 7 years? Do I buy them all today? Do I hedge them? All these questions are being thrown up. But the one thing that you're hearing is, do I buy, do I buy, do I buy, do I buy? No one's saying, do I sell? Right? And I think that's what we have to remember. Like, timing is everything in this market. There's no doubt about it. Timing is everything. And if you bought it when it was at $59, you're still licking your wounds. But today where it stands, it's like $30, $33. And we know that on a global basis, $30 in a compliance market, when it really starts to use its teeth and bring more companies into compliance, 43% reduction on Australia's emissions target is why this thing operates. It's to force change. And Owen has to go and, at the end of each year, has to talk about how he's going on that target. It's a pretty monumental target anyway. And then they're being encouraged to go to 75% by 2035 and bring that safeguard mechanism down to 25,000 tonnes. So now you're into the tens of thousands of companies that need to buy these things, unless they find ways to abate carbon. They will also take 2 or 3 years to work out how they're going to fund it and do it and yada, yada, yada. So
there's a demand and supply. It sounds like, quite simply, there's pressures to adhere to, policy for companies that have large carbon emitters. They need to, find a way to counteract their carbon emissions. So there's going to be increased demand for carbon credits, and the supply is currently being questioned because these projects that generate those carbon credits, they are, we don't have enough of those either. So it seems like there's a lack of
there's
supply.
enough today. There is enough today, but
okay.
None of those 200 companies have really started buying yet, is my point.
Interesting.
Because they only got the legislation change.
And they'll have to start buying. And again, this perfect segue into my last question. It seems like you've described these policies and these rules for businesses that are large carbon emitters, and the goals that we have to curb climate change as Herculean and a grand ambition. Do you think that we're just smacking these policies out, getting companies to abide by, whatever the legislation says, whatever the policy says? What about public spending? Because you've described some of, or let me rephrase that. What are your current observations about public spending? I know that's a different side to the coin compared to policy and legislation, but public spending still counts as part of this broader debate, I imagine. Is public spending...
In relation to public spending on what? Sorry.
So public spending on, I guess, the welfare state, infrastructure,
okay.
So not public spending, government spending. Does the Australian government's spending align with its goals to ensure that we meet these climate action goals? Are they going to give us the best chance at reducing our climate emissions? And if not, what will?
That's a big question.
Maybe we need
Because
part two.
ultimately, politicians spend money to stay in business, right? To stay in power.
Yeah.
So my answer to the question is probably not. Um, it would be a case of if the entire electorate was green and
Mm.
woke, if you will. You know, if there was a real left movement at grassroots level, probably could say mostly, but it's not. Let's not kid ourselves. There's heaps of people who, it's not that they don't believe in climate change, they don't care enough to do anything about it.
Mm.
Everyone wants a good environment. You can't go up to anyone who's got a sane mind and say, do you want a good environment? Of course they do, but they may feel they already have one, right? So what am I protecting?
Do you want a bad environment is probably a better question.
Well, I think so, but I think in terms of spending, you've got to keep your electorate happy. And at the moment, there's an inflation crisis, or it's not a crisis. It's being sold as a crisis. It's honestly, it's an immigration crisis.
Yes.
Because we keep importing people and we don't import houses with them.
Yes.
And real estate is the crux of inflation in most countries. You know, if the building industry isn't humming in China, China's slumping, right? They're cutting rates left, right, and center. They're doing what they can to keep that party going. And Australia's no different. We are addicted to property to a point that it's almost bordering on insanity, and it's going to leave a generation disaffected.
Yes.
You stalk me, I stalk you. Like, I know you recently put out a post saying that why would I want to buy property? I know, I get it, and blah, blah, but why? I'm sub 30. Well, man, I don't want. But if you had one, you'd be patting yourself on the back as well, right? Because you got in. So there's this. You still want a house.
Eventually,
who
yeah.
doesn't? Yeah, but
I just
at the
think,
moment,
but we have this obsession, and this is like an entirely different chat that we could have. It's that obsession with property, and trying to buy as many properties as we can, that's leading to this crisis. And I think bringing it back to, the crux of the conversation, it's, well, how do we front run these opportunities in technology? And in the digital asset space. And it seems as though carbon credits will have a role to play in that. And I'm excited to make people aware of that too. My last question for you, if you don't have any further comments on that point, because I know it's a big topic to cover, and then we'll wrap up after this. Why does blockchain have a reputation issue, and how can we neutralize this widely held perception that the blockchain is the land of scams and bad actors?
There's an industry being made out of doing that, right? So I don't think it's actually incumbent on you or I to do that. All we can do as a role is to highlight the good and let the good grow, and eventually the trolls will be made quiet. And frankly, I think when we step into this space, you need to be aware that people usually hark up when they don't understand something. Yeah. That's generally, doesn't matter what it is, right? And the way I sort of talk about it is, I get on a plane all the time and I don't really understand how it flies. I use a phone, I don't really understand how it works. I use all these things all day and I don't really understand what they are. Why is this any different? And once this becomes mainstream, and that's what we're really talking about here, then it will naturally increase and build on itself. This market, like any market, has good actors and bad actors. When there's bad actors, the banks like to bash, and because they're the fiat on-ramp, right? So crime is done through banks, because ultimately criminals need to spend the money that they're stealing. So we're all in the same game at the end of the day. And criminals will be criminals. Doesn't matter whether it's with a widget, with an IBM system, or anything else. Like, we could be blaming IBM systems as much as we are blockchain in this debate, because the money's being scammed through banks. And I think if there's one thing about Australia's role in this, we are an inefficient nation who doesn't really spend on technology, and we pat ourselves on the back way too much. I didn't create the Ethereum blockchain. Let's be clear. And I think I'll finish on this. So one of the things I thought was most interesting was Stephen Jones, I think, who's the assistant treasurer, recently put a post out saying, fantastic news, NAB isn't going to put links on their banking text anymore. That's how they're stopping scams, because the banks stopped using, and they put a text out on that, and we hope the other banks will do it too. God, give me a break. Like, that is not a win. That is a hoax, because the people who are clicking on it don't go on LinkedIn. They're a grandmother who doesn't know any better anyway. So, this is where we've got to stop bullshitting ourselves, really, and saying, where is the bad beginning? Like things like a traffic cop trying to stop a scooter going in a bike lane, when we should be training that traffic cop to be a cyber cop. That's where I'd like to see effort redirected, frankly.
Yep.
And we're nowhere near it, Jordan. So all we can do is get up in the morning and do our best gig, and know that if everything went in cahoots and they opened the books, I'm good to go.
Well said. It sounds like there is a lot ahead for Betacarbon, and I'm really excited to see the carbon credit market evolve. Guy, where can people find you? Because after this conversation, I'd be surprised if everyone didn't flock to your LinkedIn or wherever you like to post and share the most.
Sure. So you can look us up on betacarbon.com, climate.com.au if you're interested in helping your business move forward from a sustainability perspective, especially around climate. And then in terms, if you want to look me up, it's Guy Dickinson. There's not that many of us. I think there's three or four. Go for the grey haired fella, and look for Jordan as one of my contacts, and you'll know it's me.
True.
I'm not huge on Twitter. I wish I was. Just not. Maybe we'll get there. But everyone's welcome to follow the journey, and I welcome any more questions or reach out that people may want to push forward. I always try and respond. And if you want to trade the token and you're already sitting with an account in CoinSpot, which has over 2 million customers, please give it a go. It's a great product through CoinSpot, because you can go and put it on your CoinSpot MasterCard. I was recently traveling all over Asia, and it worked perfectly. So I use Betacarbon to buy my dinners, pay for my resort, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Thank you all so much for listening. What an opportunity to have you join us today. And I look forward to the next time I see you guys. But otherwise, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with any questions. I'm sure you'll see Guy about if you do have any questions. And until next time, bye for now.